Welcome to An Apple a Day, a podcast, a resource, a community. Share your experiences and learn from others as we overcome barriers and learn to live a happy, healthy life with a disability. Welcome to the community. Here's your host, Jimmy Apple.
Welcome to another episode of An Apple a Day. I'm your host, Jimmy Apple. How you feeling today, my friends? You feeling good? You feeling strong? You feeling better than you did yesterday? Excellent. You can't ask for better than that. Hey, we have got a good one for you today. Today we have with us the author of a new book called Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. Her name is Nicole Kerr. You are not going to believe her story. And I'm not going to give it away. Believe me, because this story has to be told by her. This is an amazing story, and you're not going to want to miss it. Now, before I fluff it up too much, I want to let Dave tell you a little bit about Nicole. This lady is very personable. She's enthusiastic, very friendly, and all I can say is you don't want to miss this. So sit back for a second, relax, and let Dave tell you about Nicole Kerr.
Let me introduce you to Nicole Kerr. Award-winning health expert Nicole Kerr is the co-author of the book, Eating the Rainbow: Lifelong Nutritional Wellness, Without Lies, Hype, or Calculus. She has appeared on CNN, PBS, CBS, ABC, The Food Channel, and a host of other TV and radio shows to share her unique perspective on wellness, lifestyle, and nutrition. For the past 30 years, Nicole has worked in all sectors of society, including, in government, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, in nonprofit, American Cancer Society, in the military, United States Air Force Medical Operations, in academia, University of Hawaii, in healthcare institutions and hospitals, Adventist Health Castle and Queens Medical Center, in corporate settings, CTIs, LLC, and in private consultation. Nicole's warm and engaging presentations have earned her a place in front of international audiences ranging from corporate food producers to health and medical associations. Throughout her career, she has focused on supporting people from every walk of life to make realistic, meaningful, and happy choices for lifelong health and well-being. When she was a 19-year-old cadet at the United States Air Force Academy, Nicole would be forced to learn how to live and love differently following a terrifying and transformative near-death experience. Her memory of the crash came back 20 years later, and it has taken Nicole almost another 2 decades to align her soul, spirit, mind, and body, proving healing is certainly a non-linear process. A disabled veteran, Nicole now maintains a private practice primarily using neuro-emotional technique, NET, targeting the often overlooked domains of emotional, energy, and spiritual well-being. And now, back to Jimmy.
Thanks, Dave. Well, now if you listen to what Dave just said, it might sound a little bit stuffy, but I guarantee you, Nicole is anything but stuffy. Just listen to this interview and don't take my word for it, you'll see for yourself. I want to mention one thing. If you have a book club, you're going to want to listen to this interview all the way to the end because there's a surprise for you. And if you don't have a book club, I suggest you start one right now because there's a surprise at the end of this interview. So sit back, relax, and let me introduce you to our new friend, Nicole Kerr. As I told you, we have with us today Nicole Kerr. I'm going to put your mind to work. She's a BTDT expert. I'm going to let her explain what that means. But she's also a disabled Air Force vet. She's also a near-death experience survivor. She's an award-winning health expert. She's a dietitian. She's a whole bunch of everything. So I'm going to let her explain everything to you. How you doing today, Nicole?
I'm doing terrific, Jim. How are you doing?
Good, good, good. Go ahead. Explain what the BTDT is.
Oh, you're not going to believe it.
Uh,
Been there, done that. And I think that is after all the letters of the alphabet after my name, that is the most important one, because I think if someone's been there, done that, you have something in common with them, and you can develop compassion, empathy, sympathy, because you know what you've been through together. It's like being in the military. If you've both been in the military, there's commonalities that you understand together, if you're both a cancer survivor. So, I've been there and done that in terms of near death, going to the other side, coming back, memory coming back 20 years later to remember it. And that's what makes me, I think, able to talk about this topic. So some people think I'm crazy for inventing it, but I think it's the most important.
well, I'm surprised because I was thinking it was something else, but okay.
But the RDN, that's the real registered dietitian nutritionist, and the MPH is the real master's in public health. Those are all real, but I did create that, and I do put it there because I want people to know, whether it's food or whatever I've gone into, I've been there and done it, and that's why I can speak to it.
Well, I think the BTDT is a real thing too.
Yes.
Honestly. So, explain to us now. You were in the military academy. You were in the Air Force Academy.
Correct. I was in the sixth class of women. In the United States, they started allowing women into the academies. The first class graduated in 80. So mine was class of 86. So it was fairly new to have females integrated into our military academy. So it was no easy thing to get admitted into them and to survive in them, to be honest with you.
And you got into an automobile accident in sophomore year?
Yeah, my third degree year, it was the beginning. In fact, it was August 28th. So it's, it was the beginning of the school year, which we're getting close to now. And we had, our squadron had an event, and they supplied alcohol for the cadets. And I asked one of the senior cadets for a ride back to the academy. And I did not know that he was drunk, and he wanted to stop and get another beer. And I was worried we weren't going to get back to the academy on time because we had a curfew on Sunday nights. We had to be back at 7:35 p.m. And if we didn't, we got in trouble. And, Jim, I was like, I'm not starting out my second year in trouble again. I got in trouble the first year so much. I just, I had so many demerits. I was walking tours, and it was just like, I'm not going to do that this year. And then, he wanted to stop and watch the sunset, and I was like, we got to get on the road and get back. And we never made it back. And it turns out what happened was the car crashed into a boulder. It was a Corvette convertible, and it didn't have seatbelts. It was 1965, which turned out to save us. But I want to say, from a public health perspective, please do wear your seatbelts, because unless you're in a Corvette convertible with the top down, that car completely flipped and landed on its top. So we would have been smooshed. But it turns out that I was pronounced dead at the scene. Some people in a nearby house came out and heard it all and could not get any kind of vitals on me, covered me up with a blanket. The voluntary fire department got there 10 to 15 minutes later, and the paramedic or the EMT that worked on me, who came to my hospital actually about 10 weeks after it happened, and told me what all happened, because I was totally unconscious. I did not remember any of it. The only thing I remembered was waking up the next day in the ICU, and I was just like, what happened? Where was I? And the last thing I remembered was driving along, and then all of a sudden I wake up. So that piece, that gap of my memory did not come back fully until 20 years later, when I was working in Atlanta at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So I want to tell people, when you have a trauma like that and you don't remember, the only thing I remembered were white lights, bright white lights. And that was it. 20 years later, I'm in Atlanta, and I'm getting a Starbucks, going to work, and all of a sudden I could see how I was sitting in the car. And I was like, oh my gosh, I pulled over, and the memory just started coming up of what happened. So instead of work, I went to my mind body chiropractor, and he was busy all day, but I sat in his office until he had an opening, and he worked with me on what they call repressed memories. And they were coming up because now after 20 years, my body was starting to feel safe enough to deal with the actual memories of what happened. And so I remember going over to the other side. I remember that I went flying through the windshield, and it made sense now how I cut off, my left foot was only hanging on by a shred of skin. It basically was amputated. I cut a huge hole on the inside of my right leg. I had a 4th degree laceration between my angle and sphincter. I severed my right wrist. I had a severe road burn on my cheek from just skidding on the pavement, and then cuts and bruises all over. And I could never understand how I cut my foot off and cut all the insides of my leg, and that whole private area. It's like, how did I do that? And then I realized, oh my God, I had one foot on the dashboard and I had the other foot crossed over, like in a, like your knee, how you cross it over your leg. And that's how I was sitting when it happened. So I went butt up through the windshield, which turned out to save my brain and my spine. But it really did affect the extremities. I know all of this, A, because the memory came back, and then B, confirmation from the doctors and the paramedic in terms of the injuries and all of that. That night, basically, the paramedics, the job was just to try to keep me alive. My blood pressure was 60/0. They had to do CPR on me all the way to the community hospital, which was the closest hospital. They were not prepared for trauma, but I had a team of angels on call that night, and I had the first woman surgeon in Colorado Springs working on me. She was the first woman to be allowed into Jefferson Medical School in Philadelphia. So she was a maverick. And then I just, I had an excellent team. But that started a whole 4 months in the hospital, 7 months of ICU. I had to have a colostomy to divert my bowels, and all of this for a 19-year-old girl. I thought going through boot camp was bad, Jim. This was nothing compared to boot camp, okay? And just, on pain meds, 7 straight weeks, Valium, Demerol, morphine. And the most, I guess, the thing that I couldn't get out of my mind was that my dad was going to kill me, because my dad had rules, and my dad was a Marine, and you followed his rules. And if you didn't follow his rules, you got punished. So when he saw me and he found out that I got in the car with someone who'd been drinking, I had a beer, he just assumed that I was dating that guy, which was not true. And, I had smoked my 3rd cigarette ever and broke his rules. So therefore I deserved what I got. And that has been the hardest part emotionally and spiritually, because I didn't get any help with that. I only got help with healing physically. My mother told, the doctor, when he said, I think Nicole needs to see a psychiatrist to deal with this trauma, and you may too, Ms. Kerr. She said, Jesus and God were our psychiatrist and we would be just fine. And that just wasn't true. I was not fine. I developed an eating disorder as a result of that, compulsive eating back in the 80s. Didn't understand why I was doing it, but I hated myself, and was blamed for this, even though I wasn't driving. So it's, there's a lot of pieces, and I present it in the book and go through the common lessons from near-death experiences as a lead-in to each chapter. And like I said, my memory didn't come back until 20 years later about crossing over to the other side, and being told that my purpose and mission was to tell people not to be afraid of death. And I'm like, oh boy, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back into that body that I could see on the ground wearing my teal Azad shirt and khaki shorts. And, I was just like, it's going to be pain and suffering, because I also knew that my family was going to be very shaming. My parents were. And that's exactly what happened. I have 3 siblings, and my dad told all of them, this is what happens when you don't listen to me. And it's just like, just really no compassion, no empathy, love that is conditional. It was harsh. It was really harsh. And it's taken me so long to let that go and realize that's who he is. And the epilogue of the book is going to blow your mind, because 38 years later, I did a Zoom call with my roommates. There was 3 other ones, and 2 out of the 3 I've kept in touch with, but the third, she quit after that semester of our sophomore year and went back to Vermont, and no one has ever talked to her since. And so I found her on Facebook, and we had a Zoom call, and all I will say is, the first thing she said is, I'm so sorry, Nicole. I'm so sorry I caused the crash. And I was like, you caused the crash, but you're gonna have to read the book to find out what happened, because that part of my memory never came back. So she's blaming herself, I'm blaming myself, and both our lives could have been forever changed if she had actually said yes to me.
Huh. Wow. There's now remember what you were saying about the book being, now I'm definitely reading the book. Now I have to know what happened there.
Yeah, because for 38 years and 2 months before it's being published, okay, I've been working on this baby, and it is a baby, okay, because writing a book, I've never had a child, but I can only imagine. I've been working on this since 13 years trying to write this book, and now is the right time. But I'm telling you, it's been painful, but it's also been healing for me, Jim, because as I've written the book, it's helped me heal. And, I hope that people, as they read it, they will have compassion for themselves, and they'll have an understanding. I talk about who God is and what God now means to me. And not that I have that figured out totally either, because we're all on a journey with it, but I know what God is not. And that was the duality that I was raised in with the Lutheran Church and the Southern Baptist Church and the Catholic Church. I married a recovering Catholic, and it's the same in that. Any church that's going to instill fear and guilt in you, that's not what God is about.
Wait a minute. Can we just go back
Sure,
a minute here?
I'm so excited to talk to you, Jim. I really am.
Wait a minute. I want to know, how come your friend thinks it's her fault and you think it's your fault? What about the jerk that was driving?
Well, this is where the injustice in the world comes in. His dad happened to be a 3-star general.
I don't care if his name was Joe Biden or Donald Trump. He was the drunk.
That's right. And he was an alcoholic, and he never apologized to me for it. And I learned any other cadet would have been kicked out of the academy, because the state of Colorado charged him with vehicular assault, driving under the influence. It was also reckless driving and speeding, but he pleaded guilty to the first 2, and the judge deferred the sentence on the vehicular assault. And he got to graduate from the academy and move on with his life. He was only in the hospital a week and got to go back and play sports and, live his life, so to speak. And I have not been in contact with him since a letter my therapist had suggested writing an angry letter. Well, I wrote him an angry letter, but I also found his address and mailed it to him. And the letter I got back from him was not a nice letter. And so my therapist was like, oh, Nicole, I didn't mean for you to send it to him. And I was just like, well, then why would I write a letter if I'm not going to send it?
Write him an angry letter. I'd give him a near-death experience.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, it's people pleasing, and I thought because I didn't have my memory of it that I somehow was responsible somehow because my dad told me I was, and that's what a good little girl from the South does is, well, then it must be true at some level. I disappointed my father. I'm to blame at some realm. I've disappointed God, so I deserved what I got. And then, now I look at that and I just go, okay, my dad's a narcissist, and I've learned all this from years of therapy, and I'm digging into this, and it's just like, when I did share the video with what my roommate said, I knew what he was going to say, Jim. He was going to say, well, then you should have walked home. And that's exactly what he said. He said, you should have walked back to the academy. You still made a bad decision. And I'm like, there was, yeah. So, dealing with a mother and a father that my mother did come out for 4 months, and she was with me that whole 4 months. And for that, I will be forever grateful. But our relationship is just cut off. They're what I would call religious addicts. And they, my dad said, I don't even believe in NDEs because they're not in the Bible. And I'm just like, well, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that is truth that is just not there, and so it's just, you can't win with someone who is an addict, whether it's religion, alcohol, whatever. So you just don't even go there anymore. So unfortunately, they're not going to admit that they have any responsibility or fault. They can't say sorry. It's like, was it the Fonz from Happy Days that could never say sorry?
Yeah. Yeah.
That goes back a while, but
it sounds like we were raised in the same family, but unbelievable. Ay. Jeez. So let's get on to this near-death experience. The heck with the heck with them. The heck with them. But yeah.
But it does factor in because that shows privilege. His dad was a 3-star. He was able to talk to the superintendent of the academy, and they were allowing him to stay. Any other cadet would have been kicked out on honor violations, and et cetera. So that's what I wanted to share with that, is that it really does matter.
Oh, it does. Well,
strings get pulled.
Exactly. And people get away with murder. They honestly do, depending on who their family is.
Yes. So what else would you like to know specifically about the near-death experience? Actually,
this may sound foolish, but it happened that night, that day. What kind of day were you having before all of this, before the party?
Well, that was a Sunday, and that was supposed to be a free day for cadets, okay? Mm-hmm. Because they keep our schedules packed. But that day, I had gone to the Commandant of Cadets' home, me and 2 other 3 degrees. He had personally invited us to his house, and we were there to speak with interested high school students about the academy. Okay, so he wanted to showcase females being at the academy. And so we had a picture made with him, and that's in the book. And I put on there, you never know when your last picture will be taken, because that was the last picture of me, the before accident me, right, versus the now me, And then that was midday. And then I had that squadron function was already going on all day long out at one of the parks. And so our squadron, there are 40 squadrons. Our squadron, it's a combination of, sophomore, freshmen, juniors, and seniors, and it's about 100 people. And we went out there to celebrate the beginning of this academic year, and they were playing softball. And so I made my way out there, changed clothes, made my way out there, got there late, and so stayed a little bit longer and was one of the last to leave. I never made it back. So, it's that quiz that I had in electrical engineering and the English paper and all that, it all just never got done. I never saw my dorm room again. They all packed up all my stuff, it's just, I never went back.
And now when you were in the hospital, Did any of the higher ups from the academy come to see you, or did they just more or less say you're on your own?
My squadron commander and the Air Force commander of my squadron did come see me. Happens that the general that I was, at his house earlier, he was in the same class as my dad. So my dad was a previous graduate, class of 60 of the academy. So he knew him. And so he never came to see me in the hospital, but I guess he was staying updated on me through various channels. And he did let me come recover at his guest house for Thanksgiving. They let me have a pass out of the hospital. And so I was able to go have dinner with him, which, my mother and I did. So in terms of his dad being the general, yes, he tried to come by and see me, sent flowers, but I at that point I was having no visitors. So I didn't see any of them.
No. Did the driver of the car ever?
He tried to come see me, and I said I didn't want to see him. I was so drugged up, so he never did. I saw him later at graduation, but I never saw him during that time in the hospital,
But
which was a good thing.
Yeah, I would imagine. Now, here's again, and I don't want to drag up anything, but were you conscious?
No.
You weren't at all. What, like when you hit the ground, you weren't conscious. You didn't feel anything.
Right. That's exactly right.
Well, that's
and to this day, I don't feel any of the pain that happened with, the injuries, which were horrific. You would have thought I would have felt, but I didn't feel any of it.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And still to this day, I have not ever felt the pain of that. It's like, it's just been erased. And I think that's what our body does to help us cope, And then at that moment, I realized I was being lifted up by, it's kind of like Casper the Ghost, but it didn't have a form, but it was a spirit, and I would call it more male in nature. It felt more male, and we were lifted up, and I could look down and see the scene and see me, and I heard other voices, and these other voices were saying, they need to ask for help if we're going to help them. And this whole bit about asking for help. The other side, angels, guides, they will help us, but we have to remember to ask them for help unless it's an emergency, which in my case it was. That was an absolute emergency where an angel came down, lifted me up, and told me, Nicole, you're going to go back. And I was like, I don't want to. And they said, you're going to go back, and your mission is going to be to tell people not to fear death. And I'm just like, but then on the other side of that is not to fear life, right? Not to fear living life, because that's what you're here for, is to live, not to just survive, but to thrive. And so many people are so full of fear that they're not allowing themselves to live life to the fullest.
Did you feel like you were dying at that point?
Oh, I didn't feel up on the other side. There was no, there's just like, I didn't even know how to put it into words, Jim. I was so happy.
Were you?
I was so happy on the other side. And I just knew going back in that body was going to be some pain and some suffering. And it has been, but that's part of the lesson, that I needed to learn. And we're all here on this planet, and we're all learning lessons, and we all deal with pain. Every single person, none of us gets away without it. And if they tell you they've never felt pain or never suffered, then I would question their honesty.
So when you came back, then you felt the pain of the accident.
Yeah, well, I didn't ever go back and feel what happened. I felt the state I was in at that moment. So when I woke up, I felt the pain in my body. Even though I was heavily medicated, I still was like, oh my God, I've got nerve pain in this one. My foot is on fire. It's just different. They kept it manageable, but I woke up and I was so swollen. I didn't have a mirror in my room, so I couldn't look at myself. But I will tell you this, when my mother and my sponsor came to look at me, both of them left. My mother went and broke down and cried. She didn't even recognize me. And my sponsor says in the book that I was so gray and swollen and just distended, and just, she said, Nicole, I did not even recognize it was you. If you would have said that was Nicole Kerr in 4C, she said, I would not believed it.
Wow.
And so, it's just, well, when you have an accident, how black and blue you get, your body just goes through all those color changes. And so I just, I felt the pain of what was physically going on, but not the pain of the accident. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, it does. My God.
And then I had to have 64 pints of blood transfused. And that's like redoing your system, 5 times or so? I forget how many pints are in our body.
You got a complete oil change.
Yeah. Yes, there are several. And that was a time, if you remember back in 1983, they had not started screening for AIDS in blood transfusion for people that were donating blood.
That's right.
And that's right. So I remember once I got home and I was doing much better, the hospital called and said, you need to go in and get an AIDS test. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
But thank God, I didn't contract AIDS.
Talk about compounding problems on top of problems.
Yeah, but you don't think about, I remember at that time there was a congressman and his daughter was in an accident. She had 1 pint of blood transfused and it was contaminated. It had AIDS and she got it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I had a doctor that it happened to his daughter. She had a transfusion and I was in the hospital and I had an infection in my system. And she was in the room 2 doors down from me. And unfortunately, she had contracted AIDS from a blood infusion.
I know.
And she passed away.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just, I remember they brought in, well, my mother remembers a 17-year-old gal in the room next to me in ICU, and she tried to commit suicide. My mother was just like, the irony, you're trying to fight for your life and she's trying to take her life,
Exactly.
It's just, yeah.
Exactly. My God. Nicole, your story is so powerful. It's so powerful. Now,
thank you.
I just can't fathom it. It's now when you were clinically dead for how long?
The paramedic estimates 10 to 15 minutes.
Wow. I don't know if you can remember what it felt like. Do you remember seeing anything? Like this is so, to me, this is such a strong thing. Do you remember I've heard people say they've seen dead relatives. They've heard voices of people that have passed on from before. They remember dark hallways. They remember bright hallways. Do you remember anything like that?
Well, I do remember my spirit lifting out of me immediately. So that's when this angel guide got me and brought me in an upward direction. So I was on a different plane. I don't know, that's the only way I can say. I was, and I did hear other voices that, so they were talking about how they can help us here on earth, but we have to ask for help. And that was that reminder, which I now believe, is you have to ask for help from the spiritual realm. They want to help, but you have to ask. They're not going to insert themselves in your life because we have free will. And so, and then on the other side, that bright white light, what I know is there are colors that we haven't even seen or imagined. And they, white absorbs all that, right? All the colors. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's why it didn't blind me or anything. It's just like, I felt so safe and secure. There was no pain. There's no negativity. There's no suffering. There's none of that. And it was just like being in a cocoon, just an astronaut, kind of like floating in space or whatever. There was none of the, it's like I didn't even, my name wasn't even Nicole. I didn't have any identities hooked onto me. And it may have been the angel that was with me, may have been a relative. I don't really know for sure, but I do know that you will see loved ones and others when you die. They meet you and they do present themselves, and even pets.
I'm hoping.
Yes.
I'm truly hoping. Like I told you, I grew up a Roman Catholic, and I have this picture in my head that's been in my head since I'm 5 years old. That when you die, you're gonna meet up with all your dead relatives, and they're gonna be waiting there for you to greet you with open arms, and and that may sound cartoonish or something to someone else, but that's the image that's been pounded into my head since I'm a child, and it stays with me.
Well, it's comforting to you, right?
It is. It
Yeah.
absolutely is. And all my
Yes.
my dogs and my cats and my birds, they're all going to be there.
Yes.
My goldfish,
In
whatever.
fact, I think the animal kingdom has shown what true love is really about. It's unconditional love. They're just, they're just unbelievable. I think it's a lesson in opening your heart even wider when you can make that connection with an animal.
Oh, I believe that. I believe that there's a special place in heaven for someone that can love an animal.
Well, and I think, it's part of the journey, part of the evolution. We will have a life review, and you see what you learned, and I think when I went back, I had to renegotiate my contract because it's like, okay, when I come back this time, I got to figure out, I was specifically told this, you are to not be afraid of death. And so many people, and our culture has created, this doom and gloom situation about death. You don't want someone to die alone, and I think that's more on the person, the human still living, than the actual person that's dying. I think they're ready. They're seeing, you'll see people as they get ready to pass, they're like reaching their hand out, right? And they're grabbing at things, and they're ready. They're ready to go. It's not scary. It is not scary. And in fact, it's beautiful. We're not judged. So many people fear being judged, somebody on the, God's been keeping a score of all your sins or whatever. That's just, you're not judged. You are perfect in your true form, in your soul, in your spiritual essence. The human form is what we have to deal with on earth, and that's what makes things hard, or challenging, I should say, because we're all human.
So you don't believe that there's pain at the time of death? You don't.
When you at the time when you die and your spirit leaves, no, there's no pain. 100%. Leading up to that, yes, you can be in pain. That's why most people are on morphine drips and things like that to deal with that pain, because for people that, if you've had health challenges and you know what pain is like, when you're in pain, you can't think about anything except the pain. You want the pain to go away, right?
Sure.
That's just, yeah. So when people come in and say, oh, try to think about, this unicorns and rainbows and iron, it's just like, I got to get rid of the pain first before I can go there,
I'm thinking about choking unicorns, right?
Yes. You got to be realistic. I'm human, and even my tooth hurts. I got to get that pain fixed before it's just my attention goes to that, So that's what makes us human too. So you got to remember that piece, that spirituality piece, in trying to, bypass people with that. That's not a good thing to do.
Now, I got to ask you another question, which seems to be really popular, especially with younger people right now, or maybe for a while. This call, this call for partying where you only live once, YOLO, all this other stuff. What do you think about that? You only live once, so you should do whatever you want.
I would disagree with that. I would challenge them. Our souls have more than one incarnation.
My thing is you only die once.
Well, each time you come in, your soul incarnates and it's here for a reason. And then you do pass, and then it comes in again, and it's a different incarnation. And that's why you can be around people and they'll just like, God, that's like deja vu, or I remember that before. Or you're carrying, ancestral imprints and generational imprints. You can also carry your past lives because your soul, once it goes out of your body, it keeps living. It's not going to like die and be like a firecracker that just falls to earth, it keeps living. So that's the place that you go to learn about, okay, what's the next incarnation? And there's more than Earth here, okay? That's the other thing. We are not the only planet with inhabitants on it, okay? Mm-hmm. And I think what's coming up now is the Earth is really in a situation where we need a lot of light workers here because there's a lot of division, there's a lot of darkness that needs to show up and be the light to come in. And what we're doing to the Earth, you're starting to see Mother Earth react with all this climate change. It's not sustainable and things have got to change, and we've got to start treating nature, animals, and people with respect and equality.
True. Very true. That leads me into my next question. Talking about treating humans and animals and everything with respect, we have to treat ourselves with respect.
Exactly.
And what about people like, take for instance, you're saying that there's a great experience, but what about people that abuse themselves, like with alcohol, with smoking? Is there any consequence for this?
Yeah, well, I would say I kind of look at it. I take Dr. Bloom's philosophy and look at the Earth, and then there's around the Earth, there's like this psychic pollution, okay? And when we die, our souls are released from our bodies, and think about it like an inflatable balloon that's in the shape of a heart with a string, and you just cut the string, and what does the balloon do? It floats straight up, right? Mm-hmm. That's like your soul. It just goes straight up and it floats away. For those who have been abusive, they're greed, corrupt, done evil things, that layer of psychic pollution, that they're going to wobble through that before they get to go straight up. Okay. The majority of us are going straight up, but people that have really done horrific things, they're not going straight up. They're going to have to wobble a while. And that's the way I interpret and understand from where I'm at this day and time. Now, you may catch me next year and I may have more information on that, but they don't go straight up. They don't get the same, quote, pass. It's like, when you go to Disney World, you can buy the fast pass or you get the regular pass and you have to stand in line forever.
Right.
They're not getting the fast pass.
Okay.
They can't buy it.
Well, what about someone that commits suicide?
They're in a lot of pain. For someone to want to take their own life, they are in a lot of pain. And, I personally believe that they will, they go straight up, and that they have to, deal with the pain that they didn't want to face here and figure out how are they going to come to terms with it, and deal with it. But it's a very sad thing, but you have to be in a lot of pain for someone to do that. And I can understand that. I can understand not wanting to live, I can understand just feeling you're so messed up that it would be better just to not feel anything. I mean, I used to tell my friend, I said, I loved going under I had 6 major operations during that time, and I've had some consequently afterwards. And I said, I love going under when that anesthesiologist comes in and he says, okay, start counting backwards. And I just am like, I love the feeling of you just totally go out, right? You don't think about anything. It just totally is like poof. And I think that's what people want when they are suicidal, is just whatever the issue is, mental illness, whatever, they just don't want to feel any of that anymore.
That's the one thing I'll disagree with you on. I've had relatives, and I had my best friend commit suicide, and that's a rough thing. That's a rough thing, and I'm mad at them to this day for doing it. There's all kinds of ways around that, and I know that you have to feel desperate, and I know it's got to be the hardest thing to make that choice. But I think that there's other ways around it, and as hard as it is to make that choice, it's harder to make other choices to go around it. And
and I think that gets back to the free will that we have as humans, to make choices. I had the free will, to get in the car. He had the free will to drink excessively. My nephew just had one of his friends overdose with, he was addicted to, he had shoulder surgery. He was addicted to opioids, and then went on the black market and started getting it there. And really, well-off kid, smart kid, and he got a bad batch that was probably laced with fentanyl. Had a heart attack, and he was only 21 years old. And so people go, well, was that suicide or was that an accident? And they didn't do an autopsy, so they're never going to know. But I don't think the kid meant to do that. I think he was just doing what he was normally doing, and somebody gave him something lethal, and he wasn't expecting that to happen.
I
but
know.
it just destroyed his family, and it just, my nephew was his best friend, destroyed him. It's just like. So, Jim, there's so many questions still that are not answered, and you're entitled, absolutely, everyone's entitled to their own feelings to work through this, but you will see them again.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. I just think that the act of suicide, well, I don't want to.
Yeah. It's I hear you.
But I was just curious what your thought is with that, because you said a good death begins today. I could see preparing for death, like you had said, but shooting for it is a different story.
I think a good death begins today when you start living your truth, living your becoming, who you really are, and not just in survival mode. And death, to look forward to knowing that it's not painful, you're not alone, to raise these fears in yourself that cause you to just, oh, I don't want to die, I'm scared I'm going to die. Bring that up to the surface, start dealing with it, discuss it. And that's why, at the end of my book, if you are part of a book club, you can, have a book club discussion. And I am willing, if I can, do it with my time zone, to pop in on book club discussions when they come around to discussing my book, and actually be there to help talk about it and answer questions as much as I can. I don't know. I'm not claiming to know all the answers. I mean, that's like a dietitian trying to tell you, you need to eat this, that, and the other, and then you hit a stress point and that pint of Ben & Jerry's comes out of the freezer and you eat it, even though you're not supposed to, but you can't deal with the stress. It's like the dopamine rush does hit, and you get calm for a little while, but it doesn't erase the root issue, and the root issue is, okay, what are you fearing with death, and bring it out so that you can have a discussion about it, and, that we can, because it's going to happen to us and we act like it's not. And then, it's like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know what, music he liked, or I didn't even know whatever it is,
Well, that's, you see now, and I want to make everyone aware of that. See now, Nicole is willing, if you have a book club and you take her book and you guys are reading her book, she's willing to jump in on a Zoom call with your book club and discuss
Yeah.
the book with you. And what better than to have the author discuss the book with you? You should take advantage of that. And her email address and her contact information is going to be in the show notes for this episode. So if you don't take advantage of that, you're a fool. Because she is, let me tell you something. Nicole and I were supposed to start this interview an hour earlier, but we got to talking. And she is got to be one of the coolest people to talk to.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Bless you. Seriously, bless you.
And we started talking. I almost forgot that I was supposed to be taping this today. So we got to talking. And believe me, you want her at your book club. So contact her. And she'll jump into your discussion with you. And you will have the coolest book club on the block. I'm telling you.
Yeah, and I can honestly say I'm doing this from my heart. This is a labor of love. I just want to truly help get this message out, because that's why I have survived 38 years to be able to do it. I know this is what I was put on this earth at this particular point in time, where we are in time, to help people realize that they are, they're everlasting sparks of God. Their soul and spirit will never die. You truly are deathless.
Now,
and my email is Nicole@NicoleKerr.com. And my website is real easy, NicoleKerr.com. And you can register there for a free chapter if you're really not sure you want to buy the book. I will send you the intro and the chapter 1 for free. Has the picture of the car, everything. So, I really did put myself out there. I talked about having an eating disorder, and people would look at me, and I'm 5'11", and I weigh about 135, and they would go, "You had an eating disorder?" And I'm like, "Yeah, for 20 years, because the pain that I was in and didn't get help with it, I was pushing it down with food." And that's hard to admit, because eating disorders you want to be secretive about. You don't want anybody to know that there's something wrong with you.
And the name of her book is "You Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death." And I want to tell you something, because I caught it during our interview here. Her book was due out on August 28th, and it came out on Amazon early. It's now available. But her accident took place on August 28th. Is that a coincidence?
Yep, 39 years. And from what I remember with the Bible, I think the Israelis wandered around for 40 years.
So look at that.
So when, it's like it's taken me this long to assimilate. I had to get into alignment to be able to really write that, because I was very disconnected from my head and the rest of my body. I didn't embody emotions. And the military is really good at that. It's only yes or no, sir, no excuse, sir. But it doesn't teach you to feel in your body. You intellectualize emotions. You intellectualize things like that. And to realize that we're all energy, and that everything and everyone is connected.
Well, I tell you what, this story here, like I said, I'm buying the book simply because I want to know why Nicole thought it was her fault. Her friend thought it was her fault. Nobody blamed the guy.
Right.
I want to know why.
Well, the state of Colorado really did.
The state did,
yeah.
But you two didn't. You blamed each other, or each other blamed each other. But I want to know why. And then
it's in there.
Then I'm going to call you and tell you what a fool you are.
Yeah.
But I want to know why. So I'm buying the book just for that.
And I will tell you, when she told that story, I had no memory that we had even discussed that.
Well,
and she thought I remembered. So it's the misunderstanding and miscommunication and never getting it clear with one another. And that's another thing that we do, is we don't clear things. I'm thinking one thing, you're thinking another, and we never get together to get it straightened out. And then you realize you both had completely different stories.
Well, I'm going to tell you another thing. I'm buying the book. And I'm gonna find out why. Now you have to send me her name and phone number so I can call and yell at both of you.
Okay. Well, you'll see her. There's a picture of her. But she was, it took a lot of courage for her to come out with this too. So she said, if it will help others, Nicole, use it in your story. And I said, okay.
Well,
because, yeah.
I'm going to tell her. Nicole, thank you so much for being here today. I
Jim,
really
it has been a delight. You are just fabulous to talk to, and maybe one day we'll meet in person.
Definitely.
Who knows,
Definitely. But this has been great, and I wish you the best of luck with your book. And this story is phenomenal. It's actually phenomenal, and I urge everybody to buy this book. You Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. You have to go out. You have to get it. It's available on Amazon right now. Nicole got her first copy on Sunday. So get your copy now.
And then it'll be out on Kindle, and it will come out in retail stores later. But there's a hardback version that they're still working on.
Well, don't wait. Order it now.
Yeah, you can get the paperback now. Absolutely.
Get the paperback. Get the paper book.
It's discounted to $5.50. I don't know up there in Canada what it is, but in terms of U.S. dollars, it's just the cost of printing.
Well, we got friends in Canada. Come on.
Okay.
Open the pocketbooks. Get the book now. You guys know it. Get it. No, really, buy the book. It's definitely worth it. This is, now, we've discussed this topic before, near-death experiences, and we've had some good conversations about it. This is definitely a book that's worth reading. And she was only 19 when this happened. And nobody's claiming, people came down and grabbed her and flew up into the sky. None of that nonsense. This is a true near-death experience. So definitely get this book. Nicole, thank you again so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I hope to talk to you again soon.
Same here, Jim, and blessings to you and everyone out there. And I just wish you a wonderful, wonderful day. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, and say hello to your husband for us.
I will.
All right. Take care. So was I right? Was that a good interview or what? I'd like to thank Nicole for being on with us today, and I'd like to thank her for her service to the country. And I'd like to thank you, the listener, for being here today. Without you, we have nothing. And I want to remind you, no matter what, things can always be worse. That's right, my friends. Right now, there's somebody somewhere wishing that they were in your position, so things could always be worse. Hey, remember to check out Nicole's book, You Are Deathless. A near-death experience taught me how to fully live and not fear death. Check that book out. And don't forget, she'll come to your book club via Zoom. So not too many people offer that, so take her up on that. And remember, all the websites and email addresses and everything that were mentioned in the interview will be in the show notes for this episode. Hey, thank you for being here today. Like I said, we've got some great guests coming up next week, and you're not going to want to miss it. So make sure you come back, check back with us. And again, thank you for being here. Have a great day. You've been listening to An Apple a Day. My name is Jimmy Apple. I'll talk to you again real soon, my friends.
Thanks for listening to An Apple a Day with Jimmy Apple, your gateway to a happy, healthy life. Join our community at www.famousapple.com. See you next time.